Hello and welcome to the Sustainable Materials Management Webinar Series, a joint effort between the National Recycling Coalition and the Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center. My name is Wayne Bowen. I'm the Program Manager for the Recycling Market Center and will serve as your moderator today. Today's webinar topic is the Solid Waste Environmental Excellence Protocol, also known as SWEEP. Please note that Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center, its affiliates and funders, and the National Recycling Coalition assume no liability resulting from the use of any information provided during this webinar. The webinar is only provided as an informational tool, and no discrimination is attendant and no endorsement by these organizations is applied. Our presenter today is Rob Watson, who I will introduce in a moment. Following his presentation, we will conduct a question and answer session. If you have a question or comment, please use the Q&A feature located in the control panel on your screen. You may also use the chat feature to request assistance if you're experiencing technical difficulties during the webinar. Please note that an edited version of this webinar will be made available for viewing via YouTube links on both the National Recycling Coalition and Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center websites. And now I'm pleased to introduce our presenter. An international leader in market transformation and green buildings, Rob Watson is known as the founding father of leadership in energy and environmental design, also known as LEED. Under Rob's direction, LEED became the largest and fastest growing international green building standard. Author Thomas Friedman called Rob one of the best environmental minds in America. In January 2019, Dartmouth Alumni Magazine recognized Mr. Watson as one of the 25 most influential alumni in the college's 250-year history. Building on his experience with LEED, Mr. Watson founded SWEEP in 2016. SWEEP is the only comprehensive sustainability standard for solid waste that's focused on local government programs and the private companies that support them. SWEEP is being released for pilot in the second half of 2019. Rob is the Chief Sustainability Officer at EcoHub LLC that has developed a disruptive technology and business model to revolutionize the global materials management industry by separating, diverting, and recycling up to 95% of municipal waste that's collected in one bin. Mr. Watson was a senior scientist with the Natural Resources Defense Council for 21 years and received the 2013 International Conservation Award from the Botanical Research Institute of Texas. In 2011, he was an International Zayed Energy Future Award semifinalist and was profiled on CNN International. Watson was the first foreigner honored for green building innovation by the Chinese Ministry of Construction in 2005 and received the first Lifetime Achievement Award from the U.S. Green Building Council in 2002. Mr. Watson is a graduate of Dartmouth College and has an MBA from Columbia and an MS from UC Berkeley. He's married to Green Schools Alliance founder Margaret Howard Watson and has a 20-year-old son, Max. And now I'm going to turn the program over to Mr. Watson.
Thank you so much, Wayne. I really appreciate the Pennsylvania Recycling Center and the National Recycling Coalition's sponsorship of this time. And I look forward to sharing the work we've been doing with SWEEP and also spend a couple minutes on EcoHub in the context of larger market transformation to sustainability. So this has been a 30-plus year journey, and a lot of it's been based on observations of what has worked in the field. How do some places achieve outsized results compared to other strategies? Typically, we find two camps, the market camp and the regulation camp, and the regulatory folks think that the only way of making progress is to regulate it, and the market folks, and obviously these are highly simplified positions, and the market folks think that the only thing you need to do is get the price right, and the market will take care of it. And both camps are right, and both camps are wrong. And what I've observed is that when you have a conscious combining of regulatory push and market pull, you can achieve outsized results. So really, in order to transform sectors, first you need to change the way you think, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But first, you have to understand the problem that you're trying to solve, and I will use the context of the climate crisis Obviously, there are sort of shorter term industry issues that are creating very real disruption in the sector. But to my mind, those are secondary to the larger sort of you bet your species problems that we face with climate. And then understanding, how to structure your system toward the outcome. And we want things to be a lot more circular, a lot more integrated, as opposed to sort of the 20th century, 19th, 20th century linear take, make, waste model. In order to deliver on the different thinking, you need a transformation in the way the industry is structured. I am biased in my belief that EcoHub will form a very key component to that, and I'll explain why. But then the bulk of the presentation will be focused on SWEEP, the Solid Waste Environmental Excellence Protocol, and it's, as Wayne noted earlier, modeled after the lessons learned, both good and bad, from SWEEP, from LEAD, excuse me. So, obviously, environmentalism, one of the canons is recycling. I'm dating myself, but it was the crying, quote, Indian, unquote, back in the 60s that got me involved in the environment, and a lot of mentors along the way. But I think as important as recycling is, we need to update our models both mentally and regulatorily, as well as from a business perspective. The choice of the flames was not an accident. If you look at climate measurements of temperatures, surface temperatures, we see that the last 100 years or so has produced significantly outsized increases compared to what we know for a 1,000-year time frame. And if you look at the projections of emissions and what those emissions of those climate emissions, including CO2, including refrigerants, including methane, those lead to a completely different world. We are already seeing global weirding in the form of unusual and very heavy storm events. We're noticing them more in part because population has begun encroaching in floodplains and other places, which makes the human impact more significant and the economic impact more significant. But if you look at the projections of where we're going, the temperature projection under business as usual, which is pretty close to what we're seeing now, the climate impacts are literally off the charts. And so when you consider that a negative 2 degrees Celsius, 2.5 degrees Celsius cooling was responsible for 1.5 miles of ice over Chicago during the Ice Age, you can only imagine what a similar push in the opposite direction will be. I would dare say that in New York City, under a full climate warming scenario, I would be having to leave my 18-story building, not from the 18th floor, but possibly from the 5th or 6th floor by boat. And this is given that close to half of the entire world's population is in coastal areas. While this is not a you bet your species proposition, this is certainly a you bet your economy proposition. So we have a very significant challenge, both from a biological perspective, but also from an economic perspective. Now, the good news is that human problems can be solved with human means, and we do have a window of opportunity. And so if we can begin reducing climate emissions within 5 or so years and continue to reduce absolute emissions aggressively, we have a very good chance of avoiding the very worst of the impacts of unmanageable climate change. And again, the good news is that we have all of the technology that we need now. The only thing that we are missing are the political and economic systems that will enable those technical solutions to be manifest at the scale, scope, and speed necessary to prevent social catastrophe. So if we look at greenhouse gas emissions from the United States, they are split roughly equally between buildings, transportation, and industry, and then agriculture provides the remaining piece of that emissions. And when confronting a problem such as greenhouse gases and global problems, one can feel overwhelmed like a person confronting this kind of a starfish beaching. And there's a story about individual action that I really like, and it involves a young girl who encountered a starfish beaching like this and began picking up starfish and throwing them back in the water. And she encountered a couple of adults who just were shaking their heads at her, and they said, "Little girl, you can't possibly make a difference. There are just too many starfish to handle." And the little girl calmly picked up a starfish, threw it back in the water, and said, "It mattered to this one." And I think all of us need to do what we can for the starfish in our lives, in our hands, throw them back in the water and save them. And that's, you know, sort of with SWEEP and other kinds of market transformation and technology activities that I'm involved with. This is my way of throwing starfish back into the water, and I invite the audience to join me in this effort. Obviously, if one person alone cannot do this, and as you'll see, SWEEP has benefited from the contributions of dozens of dedicated people, and we welcome you to participate in that process. And just to give you a sense of context, if we look at all of the energy produced by industry, initial assessments indicate that about a third of all of these industry climate emissions can be mitigated through a comprehensive sustainable materials management approach. And that is, you know, basically returning roughly 90 to 95% of the materials used back into productive capacity. And every day, new methods are being found to take discarded materials and turn them back into productive use. And we need to structure things so that we can handle that. So, you know, 1/3 of industry is roughly 9% of all greenhouse gas emissions. That is a very significant contribution. And so all of us in the industry should be proud that through our activities, we are beginning to make a big contribution, that we need to redouble our efforts so that we can capture this very important piece of the pie. So, you know, we need to stop thinking in the 1970s way where people are in charge of separation. They don't do it very well. Changes in material streams make it challenging. The diversity of programs, one thing that's recyclable in one town may not be recyclable in the town next door. Things may be recyclable or not at work, which is different from how they are in your home. And then travel makes opens up a whole new set of diverse programs. So we need a common framework, a common structure, so that we can capture all of the materials. And sending another truck, in my opinion, is just going to add additional expense, additional hassle to consumers, and my preference would be to use physics, which is the basis of the EcoHub approach. So we need to stop thinking in the way that we used to, and just, treating discarded materials like there's good garbage and bad garbage, and the idea that good garbage touching bad garbage destroys them all. We have to get rid of the notion of garbage, that everything, we have to think and structure our system so that everything in the material stream can be recovered. And like I said, sending new trucks is not the way that's going to happen. I think sending one truck and using physics to separate it, using density, dimension, and optical properties is the way to go. And that is the basis of EcoHub. But just to get people in a little bit of a mindset change, I'm gonna shut up for 1 minute and allow you folks to try and solve this problem, just to sort of prime the brain for thinking differently. So depending upon whether or not you were actually engaged in solving the puzzle, a minute can seem like a long time. If you were actually trying to solve the puzzle, a minute probably seems like not nearly long enough. So the solution, as one might guess, lies outside of the box. And so we need to stop thinking within the constraints of what we think the boundaries of the solution set is, and look outside of that. And so that's why we need to stop thinking about contamination in the way we do, and we need to stop thinking about garbage being, good and bad. And we also need to rethink the way that we attain those materials. So I'm going to show a very quick slideshow, about 2 minutes, and then we'll spend another minute or two on EcoHub and then go into the bulk of the presentation on sweep. So as I mentioned, EcoHub it represents 3 different ways of looking at things. Conceptually, everything in the waste stream can be repurposed. We can take over 95% of the materials that are discarded, and we even have a way of dealing with grit and turning it into low carbon or carbon neutral cement. And so by creating an eco-industrial campus where all of the elements are co-located, we have the ability to do that cost effectively and economically. The Max Diverter is a 58-step process that is purpose-built to separate the entire solid waste stream. It is not a dirty MRF, which is only designed to skim the quote-unquote recyclables. And then finally, we eliminate the commodity market risk by producing products and use direct offtakes with manufacturers for the paper that we produce on site, the plastic products that we produce on site, the biochar, the compost, anaerobic digestion, and gas and fertilizer are all off-taken by private companies and sold in the market directly. And so it's a completely different structure from what we have. And we believe that it will keep materials in the United States and put Americans to work. And it represents a pure circular economy vision for the solid waste management industry of the future. And the economics, it's about a $500 million investment. Direct, indirect, and induced jobs are up to 2,000. The macroeconomic activity, which was derived from a study done by IBM, exceeds $1 billion per plant. Each facility reduces CO2 emissions by about 1 million tons per year based on the WARM analysis we've done, and there are significant energy and clean water benefits. Okay, so that's the end of the advertisement, and I appreciate your indulgence in that. And let's talk about market transformation and SWEEP. So as the leading part of the seminar, or as the seminar advertisement noted, this is about identifying and rewarding leaders in sustainable materials management. And that's done through developing a set of consistent metrics and performance goals across all aspects of the solid waste industry. And we want consistency, but not necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach. And the idea is to integrate policy and practice, and it can a standard like SWEEP can form a basis for incentive programs and ultimately transform the market. So we all know that the environmental impacts of once-through material consumption is growing. We also have, in spite of the significant efforts at all levels of government and private sector, that diversion rates are flat in spite of significant increases in spending. And we do have this, unfortunately, inconsistent pastiche of metrics and programs and approaches. And we see certain programs, when they're pulling back, they eliminate glass, and others are eliminating frequency of collection, and some are banning certain materials from recycling, other than glass. Some places are even banning plastics. And so, our approach to the crisis is inconsistent, and hopefully what SWEEP can do is create a conceptual framework for sustainable materials management infrastructure that will help us regularize our approach to discarded materials across the country. We all know that China has spurred a crisis, and as President Kennedy noted, crises in China, when written in Chinese, which is sort of ironic given the source of the difficulties we're having, is that there are two components to crisis. One is danger, which is clearly evident to anybody trying to run a recycling program, but also opportunity. And I think in a time of crisis, I think the knee-jerk reaction is to fall back on, quote, tried and true. But if tried and true actually worked, we wouldn't really be having a crisis. And so I think this is the time for bold thinking. I think it's going to spur a lot of activity that will help us reconceptualize the industry and create a structure and set of programs that will help us move to a more 21st century approach, and we look for SWEEP to be part of that. We want to create a comprehensive sustainability narrative. Right now, most of the reports are about the quote failure of recycling, and what gets lost in that is that the principle of recycling is spot on, even though it may not be properly structured for the 21st century and the challenges of China leaving the market. This narrative of failure is obscuring a lot of important work that's going on in terms of improving the environmental footprint of the collection sector with natural gas, electric, and other kinds of low emission vehicles, the significant increases in efficiency, the improvements in safety and ergonomics in collection, the collection of the improvements in landfill design. There are a lot of narratives that are success narratives that are not being shared. And hopefully what SWEEP can do is reframe. So if a jurisdiction gets SWEEP certified, diversion is part of that, but it's not the only part. And so what we're trying to do with SWEEP is expand the narrative and create and make people generally more aware of the impact economically and ecologically beyond the piece of recycling. And my experience is that voluntary performance standards can drive very significant improvement in target industries. LEED is a perfect example. We have 175 countries and over 20 billion square feet certified, and it's fundamentally altered practices across disciplines of architecture, engineering, construction. Hundreds of new products have been developed, and hopefully SWEEP will be able to create a similar kind of impact and help improve the efficiency of the industry and its profitability. So, we've created SWEEP as a triple bottom line performance standard, and we're looking at the local government, solid waste sector, and also the private companies that support local government programs. So whether you're a small jurisdiction that franchises or has licenses for haulers, or whether you're a program that has your own collection department under your solid waste or public works program, the requirements would apply in the same way. We have created a simplified point-based system. It has both prescriptive elements where if you do X, you get Y points, or it gives there are credits that have more of a performance basis. If you achieve X performance, and we don't tell you how to do it, but you can document it, then you get the credits. And so we have created a 6-category system, and we have created a weighting program in each of those categories, which I will go into more in later on. So what we try and do is not create new standards or new metrics where possible. We try and look at existing safety standards through NWRA or SWANA, performance standards such as RIOs, or cores in construction demolition waste, and reference those and benchmark off of those programs. And I just need to also point out that simply because we reference a particular standard does not mean that the standard or the institution promoting that standard endorses SWEEP. So as I mentioned, we are focusing on the entities that generate and control the waste, and these standards, the local government standard and the industry standard, are have complementary and mutually reinforcing requirements. Our fiscal agent is the Northeast Resource Recovery Association, NRRA, which is the oldest resource recovery association in the United States, founded over 40 years ago, and it focuses on the states of the Northeast, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Southern Maine. And it provides cooperative purchasing programs, educational and networking opportunities, technical assistance, and cooperative marketing programs, and provides administrative support and website hosting and other services that supports the SWEEP program. In the near future, probably next year or two, SWEEP will likely become its own 501c3, and we will be eventually separating the standard development process from the standard certification process through one of the established certification programs, Green Business Certification Institute, UL Environment, Bureau Veritas. There are a number of entities out there that basically help standards like SWEEP go through the certification process. So SWEEP has been developed over the last few years by a series of volunteer committees. We have a steering committee that oversees the overall development of the standard. We have standard committees, or the overarching system. We have a standard committee focusing on the local government standard and a committee working on the industry standard. We are in the process of developing technical committees, which we will be expanding as the program goes into the pilot phase, which will be happening later this year. We are looking for volunteers to be on the committees. We are looking for expertise across the system, and I'll spend a little bit more time on that. But I do want to emphasize that we welcome professionals from all segments of the industry to participate in the development and improvement of SWEEP. Right now, we are meeting by phone and web. Basically, we have 1-hour meetings once a week, and for each of the extant committees, and then committee members do a little bit of work offline as well. But we are trying to be mindful of people's time and focus committee time on making decisions and allowing the SWEEP staff and interns to do the heavy lifting. So we have an online comment platform. We are using we're using this to accept comments. And so if you go online, if you sign up for the consensus committee, you can go online and comment on the standard. And there's more on that in later on. So this is a basic overview. The local government and industry standard committees report to the steering committee. And then there are a series of performance category committees, which are, as I mentioned, being formed. And each of the standards has a performance category, and then getting very granular at the key performance indicators of efficiency and effectiveness, environmental performance, economic performance, and working condition of social impact. Those interface with the performance category committees. So as the standard grows and we require more and more nuanced interpretations of the existing requirements, we will be bringing these technical committees online. Our steering committee members includes myself, my co-chair Susan Robinson from Waste Management, one of the founders of National Recycling Coalition, John Michael Hulls. Bob Geddert was our original steering committee member, also another one of the NRC founders. Looking upstream at producer responsibility, we have the Sustainable Packaging Coalition. Looking at data and analysis, Waste Business Journal founder Jim Thompson, representing local government perspective is City of Keene, and Duncan is also the president of the board of Northeast Resource Recovery Association. Then we're looking at labor and environmental representative through the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, and so that is our steering committee. And we have on the standard committees representatives from companies across the country. We always strive to include diversity geographically and diversity in terms of size. So we're looking for small company perspective, small town perspective, large company perspective from all different parts of the country. As I mentioned, we have some positions open on the local government committee, the industry committee, as well as the forming local government technical committees. If there is interest, please send us a letter of interest and a resume or curriculum vitae to info@sweepstandard.org. And we would be happy to talk to you about participating on these committees. I should note that the participation on the committees itself requires membership in the organization. I will go over the membership dues later. They are quite modest, but we do allow people to participate for up to a year on a committee before they decide to formally join SWEEP. So don't let membership stop you from putting your hat in the ring for joining a new committee. Where we are on the consensus process, we have submitted, or we have released, sorry, we seem to be on some sort of timer. So we've released the municipal standard ballot draft. It will be available for comment until July 15th. I'll go into that a little bit later. We expect to have all the comments resolved and the local government standard approved sometime in July. On a parallel path, the industry standard is about to have its version released for public comment, and then we anticipate having the draft approved no later than September, and everything ready for launch by the fourth quarter of this year. There will be a soft launch in Q4, and then we will be working with the pilot cities and pilot companies during 2020 and possibly a little bit afterwards to make sure that all of the data that we want to collect from the performance of the system and how different credits are utilized and what sort of support is needed has all been figured out. So the basic idea of the pilot is to make mistakes on a small level before we do the full public launch of SWEEP in 2021. As I mentioned, the local government standard is out for ballot. There is still time to vote and comment on the local government standard. If you go to the SWEEP website, you will see that there is a button. It's www.sweepstandard.org, and I'll show that later. But there's a sign-up sheet for the National Consensus Committee. This does not require any membership fees or anything. Anybody can do it. Once you're a member of the National Consensus Committee, you can download the standard. There is a ballot form and a link, and so you can vote on the standard until July 15th. And Consensus Committee, the Consensus Committee is open to new members until July 12th. So there are 4 ways of voting on SWEEP. You can just approve it. And we are basically approving the pilot version. So the standard will only go out to a limited group of people. I expect, as with LEAD, there will be people that are stealth testing the standard, but officially only organizations that have been recruited for the pilot program will be awarded SWEEP certification. And so, we're looking for either approve or approve with comments. If we got something absolutely wrong, and that can be demonstrated, then the disapprove with comments would be the vehicle to do that. And if there is a disagreement about whether whether we got it wrong, we will release the particular, we are required by our guidelines to resolve all negative comments. And if we cannot resolve a comment with the executive committee, which is basically the composition of the SWEEP steering committee and the standard committees, if we cannot resolve the negative ballot, we will put the question to the consensus committee, and they will decide whether to side with the commenter or whether to side with the SWEEP committees. So we require at least 50% of the consensus committee participating for the vote to be valid. And if we do not receive any negative votes, then the standard is approved. And all germane and persuasive comments must be resolved negatively, and any good comment will be incorporated into the standard. The process is designed to make sure that we get things right and that we've covered all of our bases. There's really not much here that is applicable to this. So that was let's go into the structure and scoring of SWEEP. So as I mentioned, there are 6 categories. The Sustainable Materials Management Policy category. The idea behind this category is that right action is preceded with intent and thought. So basically, all of the credits in this category reward you for having a goal, not an actual achievement. And then and we'll go over that a little bit more later. In the waste generation and prevention, that's about education. It's about, sort of the first 2 R's, as well as a little bit on the 3rd R, but it's also about data collection and involving people in solid waste management and educating people about the industry. Solid waste collection is fairly self-explanatory. We're looking at optimizing optimizing collection. We're looking at safety, training, ergonomic equipment, energy efficient and low emissions equipment. And then in the 4th category, post-collection recovery, we're looking at all aspects of diversion, whether it be composting, anaerobic digestion, recycling. And then in the disposal category is where we look at landfill and incineration operations, including energy recovery. And then there's an open innovation sort of extra credit category that allows you to certify. So within these categories, if you get 50% of the points, that would get you SWEEP certified. 60 to 69 points would get you SWEEP silver. Sweep Gold would be 70 to 79 points, and then 80 points and above would be Sweep Platinum. And so we've created the standards so that the local government and industry standards complement each other. So it's really about the action. And so, sorry for the local government standard is in the darker orange, and industry standard is in the lighter orange. That got knocked off a little bit. But the idea is that, you know, most of the activity in the solid waste field, it doesn't matter whether the local government implements it or whether an industry partner implements it. So for example, if we're looking at fuel economy for the collection fleet, it doesn't matter whether the local government collects it or whether they contract with a hauler to do it. So if the hauler has a complying fleet, you know, that meets the standards for certification, then both the private company and the local government get credit for that performance. So that's what's called a reciprocal credit. A non-reciprocal credit would mean a credit where both parties need to undertake the action independently. So for example, we are encouraging local governments and industries both to have environmentally preferred purchasing to create demand for recycled content products. And so since those purchasing activities are largely independent of each other, we reward them separately. So that would be considered a non-reciprocal credit. We basically have created a weighting system for each credit, and you know, generally each credit delivers 1 to 3 points, and we include economic factors, environmental factors, and social factors. And I'm gonna leave it there for right now because it's a little complicated. So just taking a quick look at SWEEP, you know, we're trying to have credits that are clear, concise, achievable, documentable, verifiable, objective, and meaningful. And so, you know, that's one of the prisms through which we're hoping the standard will be evaluated, that clear actions have been identified that allow us to, you know, have something that's documentable and that people can agree is meaningful. So basically, every credit is structured the same way, and it's basically a credit is a defined action that can be documented and verified. So each SWEEP credit has a title that gives the points and whether it's reciprocal or non-reciprocal. It talks about the intent. In other words, why do we care? And then what do we do, which is the requirement. What are the specific actions? And then potential strategies it's not part of the standard so much as more as sort of a way of getting at the how. And so, you know, these are simple examples. There are plenty of other ways of doing it, and we will have a support document called the certification manual that will go into a lot more detail about these things and calculation processes, et cetera. So if it's not in the standard itself, it will be in the certification manual. So basically the SMMP credits, they look at regulatory and policy measures aimed at minimizing solid waste generation, improving the performance of solid waste collection, processing, and recovery, and disposal. And basically, you know, it's, as I said, about intent. Here in this section, you're getting credit for a piece of paper. You can get a significant amount of credit for just having intention on paper, but you will not you will not even get halfway to certifying. So you actually have to do something in order to get sweep certified. So we look at comprehensive policies. We look at processing, local processing infrastructure and market development, adopting diversion goals, conducting regular waste characterization and generation studies. One of the things we will be determining in the pilot is how to do an expensive activity like waste characterization and generation studies on a waste shed or regional basis, so that several jurisdictions, which might be within a solid waste management authority, can pool resources and develop something with ground truth, but doesn't require each individual local government entity or each private company to generate its own study. And then looking at things that are a little bit more advanced regarding sustainable materials management policy. We're looking at greenhouse gas footprint reduction, and also programs to for source reduction, and then a variety of market-based policies, as well as promoting public participation. And then looking at the next category, which is waste generation and prevention. It's about the data collection and analysis of the efficiency and effectiveness of waste generation, which typically is very opaque, and we're trying to make it a lot more transparent. We're trying to encourage a common measurement and calculation of waste generation, prevention, and source reduction, and also rewarding source reduction programs, including food rescue, litter prevention, sustainably, environmentally preferable product procurement, sustainable capital and utility procurement, so green power, and other things that, green buildings, things that, have either the jurisdiction or the Public Works Department, walking the talk, if you will. And then providing some economic transparency to costs of different aspects of solid waste management programs. And then again, more public education about waste reduction, reuse, litter, hazardous waste, and also training of people that are in the employ of the local government and or private sector company. Under solid waste collection, we're looking at gathering, consolidating, transporting solid waste, and looking at waste receptacles and hauling practices, making sure that there is a diversity of collection options for recyclable and compostable products and materials, looking at the energy efficiency and low emissions of the collection vehicles, having alternative fueled solid waste collection vehicles, as further impetus, and we give a lot of credit for vehicles that are fueled with waste-derived fuels, whether they're liquid or gaseous, just making sure that hazardous waste is properly looked at, and looking at transfer station operations and minimizing emissions, whether they be emissions from diesel equipment, dust, litter, noise, etc. And then again, double dipping a little bit, but just emphasizing the importance of cost of showing the economic performance of waste collection and helping people understand what it costs to collect waste. And then commitment to safe working conditions, whether it's in a transfer station or in short haul or long haul trucks, and just having safety programs and training for workers, whether they're public workers or private sector workers. For post-collection recovery, we look at all the ways of avoiding disposal or landfilling of solid waste, and using either reusing, reducing, or recovering and repurposing materials. And so we look at just the whole spectrum of these activities, and we set performance, we set recovery optimization. So basically, if you reduce, if you have a diversion rate that's 10% higher than the national average, then you get a point. If you get 15%, you get 2 points. 20%, you get 3 points for that. There are also programs to incentivize minimizing contamination in bales. Contamination, education, and reduction is under, sort of the education and the public piece of it, of contamination, that's handled under waste generation prevention. This is how the MRF is operated effectively. And then incentivizing high quality products from organic materials, improving anaerobic digestion infrastructures to handle food waste, and then having a compact and efficient commodity output supply chain. So we give incentives for processing materials closer to the source of collection and distribution, and trying to make the processing more local, consistent with circular economy approaches. And then just trying to ensure that the operations of MRFs and composting facilities and other types of facilities are the most energy efficient, low emission possible. And also looking at, not only MRFs, but organics processing facilities, ensuring that rolling stock is alternatively fueled. And I should note at this point that 75% of the municipalities will likely not qualify for SWEEP because it's designed to be implemented by the top quartile. It should also be noted that not every credit is applicable to every type of jurisdiction, but that certainly enough credits for to achieve platinum will be available whether you're a small rural jurisdiction or a large urban one. And so there may be some credits that are just not applicable to your jurisdiction, but rest assured that there are other credits that you can get that other people will not be able to achieve just by the nature of their jurisdiction. And so, that's one of the things that we'll be looking at in the pilot, is ensuring that, the system is balanced and not biased against any particular place. And then disposal is looking at the energy efficiency of thermal conversion technology, also alternate fueled rolling stock, minimizing emissions from thermal conversion. Sorry about the timing thing, guys. Looking at stormwater management, capture of methane and minimizing other types of emissions. And that should be disposal cost effectiveness, not solid waste collection cost effectiveness, and then looking at safety and good neighbor policies for disposal facilities. And we also have that for recovery and collection facilities, good neighbor things. And then innovation, just rewarding things that we didn't think of or things that might not be sufficiently developed to put in the basic standard. This is sort of our field development team, squad, if you will, is developing things or recognizing exceptional performance. So, we've got a website, as I mentioned. I encourage you to visit it. You can see in the top right-hand corner where it says register for the National Consensus Committee. And so, and I'll apologize in advance. The website's a little bit clunky. We're working on it. We're trying to streamline it. So just be patient. And again, accept my apologies in advance for the clunkiness. And so, we've had a lot of traffic growing. We've got some really interesting blog pieces, a lot of data. So I urge you to read things there. There's some good stuff. The text of the local government standard is posted, and the industry standard will be up there very soon, and you can comment on the standard via the website. It wouldn't count toward the ballot, but any good idea any way to make the standard better, we will adopt it. In the future, we'll be having a certification manual that will give a lot more background and information on the topics. We will include, the equations and the calculation methods, default values, as well as detailed strategies and case studies. Ultimately, we will have a print version, but ultimately this is going to be something that will likely be an app, and we will be linking it most likely with the ReTrack Connect program. Similar to the municipal measurement program, we want to create a series of common and uniform ways of defining and calculating certain things. And so we are in the process of developing a partnership with ReTrack, and we will likely use ReTrack as ultimately as the method through which materials are submitted to SWEEP. And if everything goes as anticipated, simply uploading your data will automatically generate your SWEEP score with a minimum of additional input on your end. All of the money we collect through SWEEP will go to creating tools to make the system better and less expensive to certify. Eventually, we will have training and a professional accreditation, and all of these programs, like I said, require your support. If you are a local government or a state government, price is pretty low. If you're a small city or county, it's only $250. A medium city and county is $500, and a large city or county is $1,000. On the private sector side, if you're a nonprofit or a small company, again, very reasonable. If you're a medium or large company, it's $2,500 to $5,000 to participate, and that gives you access to committees, and anybody who is a member, any person who is an employee of the company or membership can participate, and any 3 people from a member can participate within the committee structure, and then anybody can have access to the web portal. And we're also looking for folks to be pilot jurisdictions or companies. And so feel free to reach out or note in the Q&A, or just write to info@sweepstandard.org indicating your interest. Just in the last minute, being a member allows you to participate in the development of SWEEP. You can help us improve the performance of solid waste programs and services nationally and potentially internationally. Fully a third of the traffic on our website is international, so there's a huge amount of interest in SWEEP internationally. And we're trying to demonstrate environmental and economic leadership and commitment, and being a SWEEP member demonstrates that, and how to improve your own practices and implement best practices in sustainable materials management and zero waste, and help change this sector toward environmentally optimized situation. And then having third-party verification and validation of your programs, which is really important, because anybody can claim themselves to be clean and green, and you may very well be, and you may put in as much work as you would have to be certified, but having a third-party independent verification gives you a huge amount of credibility and support. So, particularly young people are looking to live in jurisdictions and work for companies that are walking the talk with sustainability. And as I mentioned at the outset of the webinar, having SWEEP certification demonstrates your commitment to these things. This can be part of building a socially responsible brand, and having a hand in that development establishes you as a leader. And we have published material on the economics of the industry and trends in landfill pricing and capacity that I've not seen anywhere else. So we're doing a lot of good work there. And obviously, as we grow into our own 501c3, we can members will be considered as a board of director, and that will convey that leadership that people are people need to demonstrate that they're walking the talk. So I really appreciate I know there was a lot thrown at you all. I really appreciate you attending today, and happy to go over any question that folks might have.
Okay, thank you, Rob, for that great presentation. We do have a few minutes left for some Q&A. So if you do have a question, please use the Q&A feature on the control panel. And so I have a couple questions here already. This question asks, will a zero waste goal count for a sweep credit?
Yes, it will. Although many people are wanting to regularize sort of the circular economy, zero waste, sustainable materials management language, we at least initially will be using those goals, using those terms interchangeably. But my guess is that down the road, because sustainable materials management reaches upstream, and it's not just arguably a downstream focus thing, we will probably be converging towards that. But the short answer to the question is yes.
Okay, and next question is, well, there's actually two more questions here. Earlier you said energy recovery was in disposal. On this slide, you include energy recovery as part of PCR. Which one is it? Is it disposal or PCR?
Yeah, I think if we're doing energy recovery from organics, that would be considered recovery, because there are multiple other things associated with it. The energy recovery is in a gray area, and my guess is that the conversation will be continuing through the pilot and on into the launch. As an initial foray, we put it in disposal, but regardless of the category, extracting energy and extracting it efficiently will receive credit under sweep, and we encourage it. But I think waste to energy, at least within the framework of sweep, is considered a preferable disposal, but a disposal strategy nonetheless.
All right, this attendee asked to see slides 55, 66, and 92. I'm not sure if it's a question there. They just wanted to see them.
Okay, let me see if I can. All right, let me just, so 55.
Yep. That's the committee structure, it looks like.
Okay, yeah, so, the structure may end up being a little bit less complicated than that, because there is about 80%, whoops, sorry about that. Because there's about 80% overlap between the local government and industry standard, we may consolidate the performance category committees. And if there are nuances and details, we may have the KPI committees deal with those separately. So, this is sort of the current vision. One benefit of having all these different committees is that it broadens opportunities for participation, and we want this to be as broad-based and democratic a process as possible. The downside is that it can be a pain in the neck to administer, and could be overly bureaucratic. So, we're looking at those those issues. So that's that slide. What was the other slide?
66.
66. Okay. So so there right now are two prerequisites, and then in sustainable materials management, there are 9 credits, and across those 9 credits, you get 21 points. I should note that there is 1 performance credit, which is credit 1, which gives you up to 19 points. And so this is a comprehensive sustainable materials management approach, and that's a performance pathway. And then if people want to take it on a little bit more piecemeal and transition, the other credits can be looked at in a slightly more prescriptive way. And then what was the final slide?
92.
92. Okay. All right. Okay. So these are just, again, without going through it, this is, what we see as some of the benefits of membership in SWEEP is. And I should also note that because the contributions go to the Northeast Resource Recovery Association, and it's a 501c3. If you are interested in tax benefits, they are potentially available to that.
Okay. I didn't pose the second question of that previously. So what do you define as chemical recycling? Does that include pyrolysis and other thermal processes?
Yeah, chemical recycling. Yeah, again, pyrolysis is one of those interesting gray area things. If you are, and so I'm probably going to leave it there because it's a much longer discussion. And I don't know if the committees have agreed on whether it's a disposal or recovery process. I think it's one of those things that we will probably end up hashing out in the pilot. So that's one of those things that's on the fence, and we want to get into the ground truth of the pilot, and we will have a deeper determination by the time we launch in 2021.
Okay. Considering the roles of existing national and state waste recycling professional organizations, would they be considered partners or kind of on the sidelines of this process?
We would absolutely welcome working with all professional organizations. We do have a, in terms of voting on the standard for what are considered industry trade associations that have a direct economic stake in the outcome, we ask that those the position of the trade association be represented through one of its members. And so leaving that aside, looking farther down the road, I am and this is something that LEAD failed to do, and something that I would really love to do with SWEEP, and something that I'd like to engage national and state organizations in, is creating, I'll call it a mid-market sustainability standard. SWEEP is aimed at the top quartile, but that's 75% of the market that's not addressed. We won't get the bottom quartile no matter what we do, but I think there's a huge opportunity to get the middle 50%. And that is an area where I can see very productive partnerships with all sorts of players in creating an entire ecosystem of sustainability standards, not just the leadership standard that we're developing with SWEEP.
Okay. All right, we're getting close to our allotted time, but I'm gonna do these 3 questions here, then we'll end. What is KPI?
Oh, my apologies. Yeah, there are way too many acronyms, and it stands for Key Performance Indicator.
Okay. Does SWEEP recognize or reference implementation / certification of ISO or OH, SAS, ISO 14001, ISO 9001, and the OHSAS 18001 safety.
Those, having those types of certifications probably will result in some credit. And we haven't gotten into that level of detail yet, but you know, our goal is to piggyback on existing standards to the extent that they result in meaningful and documentable environmental action. We certainly would not set aside any certification. You know, we want a big tent. We want to make it, at least initially, not super onerous to certify. As we learn more and the industry begins shifting, SWEEP will be under a 3-year continuous improvement process, and we will be, you know, pulling the market train forward, and you know, the standard will become more and more rigorous as time goes on. But we will be quite open to considering all meaningful achievements as documentation of environmental performance in solid waste.
All right, last question. Will the SWEEP program be given to a building like LEED, or will it be given to a particular facility, program, like a blue card recycling program, a business unit, municipality, or company as a whole?
Yeah, okay, that's an excellent question. So when developing SWEEP, we really wanted to address a gap or a hole in the market that was not filled with anything. Most of the examples given in the question would be covered by something like the true standard. And so, you know, we would recognize a municipality for having a certain number of buildings or their own buildings certified to the true standard, which is administered, TRUE, which is administered by the Green Business Certification Institute. And while we certainly encourage and credit facilities to being LEED or true certified as part of the overall certification scope, the only things that are being certified by SWEEP is a municipal or county or solid waste authority program, or a solid waste company. Now that could be anything from, you know, a privately operated MRF that's a standalone facility. It could be a small hauler that only does hauling. It could be a vertically integrated company that has a landfill, hauling, a MRF, transfer station, et cetera. So within the context of the industry standard, we will be having relevant carve-outs of that standard applicable to, you know, the scope of the business. So, you know, for example, if you're a small hauler, you won't be penalized by the fact that you don't have a landfill. And, you know, how we structure the standard and distribute the points, et cetera, that will be determined in the pilot. That's something that's the reason we're doing the pilot, is to figure out operationally how we handle things like that. And so that's the end of my question. I noticed that there are a bunch of questions coming up. I don't know if there's a way of, you know, compiling them with the questioner, and I'd be happy to answer them after the you know, after the seminar.
Yeah, I think the attendee report includes the questions that were posed, so we will. I'll give them to you, Rob, and we'll hopefully you can address them and forward them back to the attendee.
Yeah. Okay.
We're out of time, so I appreciate
yes.
you taking the time for this webinar and answering the questions. So again, this webinar, like all the webinars in the series, has been recorded and will be made available via YouTube links on both the National Recycling Coalition and Recycling Market Center websites. Thanks again for joining us. We hope you'll join us for next month's webinar. And please visit the NRC and RMC websites for scheduled updates. So thanks again, and have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.